All right, so I'm told that we're up to residential chapter recommendation 90, and Andrew has an issue in relation to the objective clause. So what is the purpose of the adding that sentence?
Okay, so the comment was, one issue with the strategic directions is they're very focused on Christchurch flatlands, and in fact part of it even goes as far as stating provides for urban activities only within existing urban areas. Now that's fine for Christchurch City. For Banks Peninsula though, it's not part of the greater Christchurch area, or a large part isn't. And for some of these settlements, it may be appropriate that some growth is provided for, or some change over time. Not to say that these areas are expected to, require major extensions to them, or that will be desired, but some change may be appropriate. And by not including some, providing for some limited growth or something in the strategic directions, it would be limited if a development proposal came forward for, say, a change to some of the small settlements. So that's why I suggested that there is an additional part to the objective proposed there.
But as you say, it's outside the urban development strategy area.
Yes, but when you read objective, strategic direction, objective 337, it says a well-integrated pattern of development and infrastructure, a consolidated urban form and a high-quality urban environment that provides for urban activities only within existing urban areas. An existing urban area is that which would be currently zoned, and we're not at this stage proposing any extensions to the small settlement zones in Banks Peninsula.
So why are we writing that in there?
So that if a plan change comes forward seeking to do a future zone, that we still can provide for some limited growth around the settlements in Banks Peninsula.
But why can't you do that without putting that in the objective?
Because it goes through in
strategic directions, objectives, you might recall, and especially now that there's that process objective in the strategic directions, we need to ensure that we have some capability through the strategic directions to be able to do this. Otherwise, if there was a plan change that came forward and this capability wasn't here, we'd just have to reject it outright, even though it might have had some good values associated with it.
it may come down to, if you didn't include that, it would come down to interpreting whether a development proposal is within an existing urban area. Well, if it's proposing to extend it, that wouldn't be clear. It would be saying, well, it's not within an existing urban area. We're proposing to extend an existing urban area. So this is just providing that flexibility for some settlements to change.
So tell me why you don't want it in there, Andrew.
Yeah, I certainly don't believe that this would be supported by most of the people who have chosen to live in the small settlements on Banks Peninsula. There is a Banks Peninsula small settlement study that identifies identification in Akaroa and then development in Wainui, and there are some consented developments in Wainui already. One of the things we heard through the consultation we did over the Wainui wastewater scheme is that one of the reasons that some people in Wainui were saying they didn't want the wastewater scheme development to go ahead was because they felt that it would expand that settlement, even though it's identified in the small settlement study as an area that could be expanded. If we're looking at the genuine small settlements in the Banks Peninsula and widening that net, I certainly find it difficult to believe that the sort of permissive expansion, or a more permissive expansion, the way that you've talked about, would be supported by people who have chosen to live in those small settlements for good reason. And Jamie talked earlier about people deciding to live in special amenity areas because of their their character and amenity, and definitely the small settlements on the peninsula would be places that people choose to live or have chosen to remain to live because of their amenity and their character. So I certainly can't support those lines in red being added, because I believe that they're totally out of line with the expectations of the people that live on the peninsula, who would definitely prefer the status quo to the sort of development that you've talked about.
I mean, the intention there was to, provide for some limited. So, the word was limited. I mean, we could take it out. It would be, as I said, if that is sought to keep those settlements exactly as they are. I mean, some of them may need to change over time. They may be affected by sea level rise, or they may want some limited expansion. I'm not suggesting in any way, and don't believe the market will even go to that extent of major changes, but it would be very difficult to even consider a very minor change. I mean, that was really what my concern was with the way that strategic direction is currently written. But, I can just foresee a problem in the future if an application came forward.
So what would be the process for I mean...
We'd just not include that.
But what would be the process then for, say, for example, sea level rise meant that Pūrā had to move further inland? What?
Well, I mean, I've also proposed in the draft a number of, and this may raise, part of the inconsistency. And that was the draft that went through and was agreed. There was an objective for Banks Peninsula, and also one that talked about each of the settlements, and it said actually providing for some, change and small incremental change around them. So what I'm now, if we take this out, I actually potentially may see an inconsistency between what we proposed for that objective and 3 policies around, consolidating any large lot development around existing settlements. So I sort of see...
But I don't actually think of Pūrā as urban. I don't think of these little places as urban. So I don't know whether we're trying to
Settlements.
backfill...
They're actually called settlements in the RPS and in the... in the UDS, in the urban development strategy. They are called that. They're not called urban.
I mean, urban, you do tend to think of a city, but they are residential activities. Yeah. As I said, I mean, you could take it out, you could leave it to interpretation through the other objectives and policies, and I suppose trust in the fact that this won't be an obstacle in the future, that it may be able to be interpreted in a different manner.
I think it's in the wrong place. Like the heading is urban growth, form and design. So it just doesn't feel right to be talking about residential settlements in that area. I mean, I can understand you want it in an objective, but I wouldn't put it in this one.
No, I mean, the difficulty I had there was really with point C. Provides for urban activities only within existing urban areas. That was the main, and I didn't want to see that as a barrier to. I take your point that major growth will not occur in Banks Peninsula. It's not desired, but I didn't want the settlements to be left with absolutely no flexibility to change.
But we've got rules somewhere else for the settlements.
Yes. Yes. In the residential chapter, I'm proposing some other objectives. What I didn't want to make. What I was just raising is there is a potential inconsistency there between what the message was given through the proposed objectives and policies for Banks Peninsula that I've proposed through the draft and in here. That was the point that I was just raising. But and it's just I take your point that it is this really is about major urban growth.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really set the scene for Banks Peninsula. That's all.
No, it doesn't. And it just doesn't feel like it should be there.
Except that the regional policy statement, MAP A, does have these settlements on it, as well as the rest of the urban area for the city. That's why it's there.
Well, I mean, this is a strategic direction for the whole of the district. It's not just for Christchurch City.
Yes, I know, but is urban growth, form and design, is that really what we want as the objective? The objective is to allow limited growth and change to residential settlements in Banks Peninsula, but that's not urban growth, form and design, that's...
Oh, yes, I take your point, but this is an overarching, the way, if you take away the heading, its intent is a well-integrated pattern of development and infrastructure, a consolidated urban form. Well, that's the where the term consolidation, and that is what we want to achieve for Banks Peninsula. That is an overarching objective. We want to keep any change consolidated around the settlements in a high-quality urban environment. Well, that is also what's sought for Banks Peninsula. So, I mean, you could leave it as it is. You can make no mention of Banks Peninsula and just let the lower level policy, objectives and policies, stand and have the most, and I suppose trust that they'll have due consideration. But it is this higher level one which we ultimately have to ensure that our objectives and policies through our residential chapter are giving effect to. That was, I'm...
Right.
Well, in line with what I said before, I'd like to move that we take those red lines out.
Is there anyone who's objecting to that? Because if no one's objecting to it, then we'll proceed to vote on it. All right. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.